Well, the way I usually will make my tenons is I just turn them on my power lathe. And so I super dry them and I turn them, you know, to the exact size of the drill bit or just a little bit more, where you have to pound it in or tap it hard in. I wouldn't say pound it in. I don't like it quite that tight. But there's other ways of doing it, and that's what I'm going to show you. Now you see, I've already turned a lot of the tenons here, so we're kind of cookbook stuff going on here, or cooking show stuff going on here. But I've left one that I'll make for you. So one way of doing it is just to whittle it. And I just noticed in this issue of Fine Woodworking, now you might be watching this 10 years from the time I film it, so it would be the September-October issue of 2019, that Peter Follansbee has an article in there on post and run stool, and he shows how to whittle. So he's taking a block and then he's just whittling until he can just get a really tight fit in that block. That is the simplest way of doing it. It's not the fastest way, but it's the simplest way of doing it. Now, a way that I used to do it, for years I did it like this, is I would pound it through a plate. So this plate's 1/4 inch thick metal. Now I had to take this to a machine shop to have them bore holes in it. So you'd have to have access to that. And then I would get the tenon close, one way or another, maybe on the lathe or maybe with the draw knife. And then I would just pound it through the hole that matched the drill bit that I was going to use. Now one thing that will happen with that method is it will mushroom with you up around the shoulder. And so if you could score that first, like, I don't know, I used to just drill a bigger hole and stick it in the hole and put a chisel down and rotate it around and let the chisel score it. Then when you drive it down and it hits the full length of the tenon, then that mushroom part just falls away and you end up with a nice clean shoulder there. So so anyway, that's 3 ways of doing it. You have the power lathe, you can whittle it, or you can do it with this drive plate. But I'm going to show you how to do it on a spring pole lathe. And one of the things that I gained, some knowledge that I gained while working for Greenwood in Honduras in these remote areas, was the skill of putting together a real simple pole lathe just for turning the tenon. Brian Boggs and I made quite a few of them, and we could make them very quick out of what material was on the site. We might even just use a standing tree, or maybe if we were at a building and the building had some posts, we'd use those existing posts instead of a sapling for the pole in the spring pole lathe. We might use an inner tube from a bicycle that was fairly common down there, or sometimes I'd travel with bungee cords and I just use a bungee to do it with. And so spring pole lathes have become real popular in recent years, and some people like Robin Wood and others have done just amazing things with them. But this just gives you an idea of a real simplified pole lathe, just for turning the tenons, just accurate tenons. So yeah, we'll just switch over and I'll show you what I got going. Okay, I've got the spring pole lathe minus the pole, because I don't use a pole, set up. So it's just, I just use just two 2x pieces right here, and they're just wedged up underneath this beam here. And I nailed the tool rest on the height that I thought I wanted, beveled the top of the tool rest and just nailed it on or screwed it on, one of the two, I don't know. I guess I screwed it on. And now for the points are these lag screws. They're 12, they're 1/2 by 12, and I've filed or ground the tips down to where they're slick, because if they're rough, they'll screw themselves into the ingrain of the tenon. But so you want it real slick on there. And then I just drilled 1/2-inch holes and just run them through with the wrench, and that's your throw right there. It's just that. The treadle is just some scrap that I had just lying outside the shop, and put it together in a triangle, and then a piece of rope. And so the only other part of it that I haven't shown you is the bungee. So it's running off the bungee, and I just tied it off to the rail up there in the shop. I mean, you could just tie it off anywhere, off to a tree or just whatever would be high enough. I guess I've got 2 bungees there to try to get more revolutions. So okay, so we'll start turning on it here. Okay, well, I'll show you. So first off, let's release that. I take just one time around, and so one disclaimer here is, as many pole lathes as I built in Honduras and got people started on them, I've never turned on one much. So if you want to learn how to turn on a pole lathe, I'm probably not the person to watch. But if you just want to learn how to build something simple like this and turn a tenon, then I can show you that. So let's see what kind of a. So I tighten it up to where it's too tight, and then I just back off of it just barely until I can. There we go. So I'm getting. There we go. Just need a bit more. I'm getting about 8 revolutions off of it, and I reckon that's pretty good. You'd have to ask somebody that turns on pole lathe if that's good. Now, with the theme of trying to minimize what tools I have introduced, I've already introduced this 3/4 inch chisel. Can't think exactly where I used it, but I might have used it somewhere. But I'm going to use it later on too. So just trying to leave it just with one chisel. But you can also use just a bench chisel. But I'm going to cut this tenon with this bench chisel. Now, if you have a turning chisel, then that's. I was just looking at my edge there. It looked a little suspect to me. If you got a turning chisel, then by all means use it. And then for the size of the tenon, you want these things to be pretty accurate. I'm using a wrench that's just filed to fit the tenon, the drill bit. Okay, so let's just see how I can do this thing right here. So you see it? Okay, let's check, see what I got. Fairly close. Okay, so you hear that sound, that bouncing sound? That means that it's loosened up on me just the least little bit. And let me get that thing back. There we go. Adjusted here. This thing's running crazy with me. You can edit out that part. That's because that has moved. See, not like that. Okay. Let's check it again. So it's getting really, really close. I think maybe that thing is making it, I don't think it's, tapping over it right like that. And it comes back for, you know, a good inch. So that ought to be good. Now I'll take it over to the shaving horse, and I'll take that octagonal down and match it up to the tenon to where I don't end up with a shoulder. It makes it look a lot sleeker. So when we come back, we'll be putting the undercarriage together.